Okay, let's welcome in Newsmax CEO Christopher Ruddy. Chris's latest column is available at newsmax.com, and Chris will talk about that more in just a moment. But first, the news today, the latest ruling from a federal appeals court says that Donald Trump does have to comply with a subpoena and hand over his tax returns to Manhattan prosecutors. President Trump won in 2016 despite not releasing his tax returns. Do you think tax returns will be an issue in 2020?
Good question. Obviously, it's a big issue in the news. My view on this, John, is that the president and every major federal official should release their taxes. I think it's just good government, and I've said that. The president has indicated he'll eventually release it. He said there's an audit. I don't know the details of that. I do know that just because a businessman becomes a candidate and then an official in the government doesn't mean that everything he's done in his private life should be investigated. There is no constitutional requirement that any candidate release their tax returns. The voters knew about that issue. They voted him in the 2016 election, and they'll have this issue to vote on in the 2020 election.
Yeah, we'll see if he complies. And that audit has been going on for quite some time. So, we know that argument might be getting a little harder to defend as well. Let's talk about impeachment. Republicans and the president are calling for the whistleblower to testify publicly. Do you think if this person did come forward and testify before TV cameras, would that change anyone's opinion, considering what we know from the transcript of the call?
Well, at the very basis now, we know the facts already indicate the whistleblower didn't really know what they were talking about in the first instance. Remember, they were never a direct witness.
Right.
They were never involved in the call itself. It was something they heard hearsay. They got one of the fundamental facts wrong. They said that the president required a quid pro quo. We know from the conversation and the transcript, and all the witnesses so far seem to indicate that never happened. So there's already, why was this whistleblower even making this complaint? I'm not so sure. And it's interesting, and the president pointed this out yesterday on his press conference, none of the people that were directly involved actually made the official whistleblower complaint or actually made an official complaint. Some people were concerned about the nature of the call, but nobody seemed to take it as far as this person who still remains anonymous.
Right. And, we hear about all these people that were listening into the call, right? And, you've studied, presidents for a long time. I've studied history for a long time. Nobody would confuse Donald Trump's tactics with conventional presidential behavior, right? But it seems like there are so many people that overreact to these types of, I don't know, however you want to call them, but behavior that wouldn't normally be done inside the White House. And it does seem like every time Democrats do this, they overreach. I mean, the House Democrats, they started releasing more of the testimony from these secret hearings. They took that vote last week. Do you see this as a sign, maybe an admission from Democrats that they may have started to overplay their hand and this whole thing is on the wrong track for them?
Oh, I don't think they view it at all like they're overreaching. I think they think that they're on the right track. But I do think, I agree with how you put it. I think the American public are going to look at this and say they're going too far. My view is if you look at how the president handled that call, I think generally it was a fine call. There were no major criminal issues in it. There was nothing impeachable. Generally, I think the call was fine. I have one issue with the call where he asked for an investigation of the Bidens. Mm-hmm. My view is, and I've been a consistent defender of the president, is that he was the victim of people making criminal investigations against him, at least on one account with the Mueller, but there have been other things now. Just by claiming that they thought he committed a crime, there was no evidence he committed a crime.
Right.
So I've always been consistent that there has to be evidence that the Bidens committed a crime for a federal investigation. That said, the president's the chief law enforcement officer of the nation. He can say something and suggest it. He actually had said some things publicly before that phone call that indicated he wanted an investigation. So it wasn't like he was doing it secretly. As you said, he's sort of transparent this way.
Very transparent.
I sort of like how Alan Dershowitz has called it a political sin. I don't think it's a crime.
Right. And Nancy Pelosi says, when she says no one is above the law, then they then have to present this as if it is the president breaking a law. And what law exactly are they pointing to? That is a question. The Hobbs Act, maybe, who knows? But how are you going to sell that to the American public? Speaking of the American public, this weekend on Meet the Press, they played some clips from Americans all over the country. They asked these folks how they feel about impeachment. Here's what they had to say.
And I think it's a waste of time. There are a bunch of little kids fighting and not accomplishing what the hell they're elected for.
I think we have a system of checks and balances, and the way it should work is that, the House and the Senate should do what is set out in the Constitution?
I read the document, and there was absolutely nothing concerning to me from one president to another. It was absolutely appropriate.
They felt like, Chris, this was a waste of time. Your column kind of makes the point that President Trump is being impeached for being too successful. But this is why I ask you if Nancy Pelosi and Democrats, when they start get out of their district, they're back in their home districts this week, if they start talking to the public, when they start talking to people who don't work in media or in government, maybe they do feel like, or they're going to learn that they overplayed their hand.
I think they know at the end of the day they don't have anything. The reason they're doing this is to divert public's attention from the A-plus performance the president has given the country with his job, the way he's managed the country. I think if you look at the economy, even foreign policy, he's doing an incredible job for a guy that has no political experience. And, you know, talk about reform, criminal reform, tax reform, VA reform, you could go on the list. It's endless of the things he's done, and they don't want to talk about it. You know, Pelosi said she wanted to put the president in jail a few months ago before any of this broke. So I think the American public, there was a poll that came out that showed only 1/3 of America believe that this should be a priority for Congress.
Yeah, that CNN poll that you reference in your column. And speaking of that, you also make a comparison to the Iran-Contra Affair. And you say that President Trump what he's accused of doing basically is small potatoes when you look at the real facts of the matter involved with the Iran-Contra Affair. But Ronald Reagan also was pretty great about going on TV and being contrite with the American public, saying he didn't really understand what everybody was doing and he may have made a mistake. We won't see that from President Trump based on what we know about him. Can he still be as successful in his defense of these allegations against him?
I think you might see some walk back on some of this. You know, over time, there might be some understanding that some of the things he did was not politically good. I don't think anything he did was a crime, but everybody can say, hey, you know, maybe I did go a little too far here. Or I didn't realize that this was such a problem at the time. I think the public likes that. I wouldn't say the president never walks back anything, because he has done occasionally. I think his position right now is the media is so vicious against him. You have in Schiff, and they're hysterical, and the way they've been treating this impeachment process it's sort of scary. You know, they accuse him of abusing power, but if you look, John, I mean, they're not allowing the Republicans to ask questions. They're calling these witnesses in. They're very selective. They're saying they had to do it in secret for classified info, and then they selectively leaked all the bad things
and now
that they wanted
today,
out about him.
They're leaking. I shouldn't say leaking, but they were releasing more of the testimony from these secret hearings. So the question is, why didn't they do that in the first place? And, you know, speaking of the media, anytime someone makes the slightest criticism of Donald Trump, they jump on that. They pounce on that as if another person is, you know, breaking with the president on this. And you experienced this personally. You were recently on Al Jazeera. And the headline around a lot of media outlets was, Trump ally says it was absolutely unacceptable what Trump did on his phone call. Could you clarify for us what actually took place there?
Yeah, I didn't use the word unacceptable. I just said that it was inappropriate. Again, it goes back to the issue of, I don't believe people should be investigated, but I did not think that the president broke any rules. Maybe he broke a protocol on this issue, but it's not anything that I think would be impeachable. You know, Tom Brokaw just came out with a book on Watergate, and he said the Democrats have yet to surface anything that's an impeachable crime by the president. So why are they doing this? It's an allegation in search of a crime, which was the same thing the Mueller went on for 2 years.
Right. And once it stretches into 2020, the question is, why not just settle this at the ballot box? And there seems to be some talk of that already. Pete Buttigieg mentioned that in Iowa this past week. It's hard to know if Democrats will really have their heart into this fight based on what we know so far. Chris, great to see you as always. Thanks so much.
Good to be on with you, John. Thank you.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel. Newsmax TV is now available for free on your smartphone. Just go to your iPhone or Android store and download the free Newsmax TV app. Then you can watch free TV news with an American spin anytime, anywhere in the world. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.